Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to our talk about immunity and gut health. Now, before we get to it, let me just briefly introduce myself. So, my name is Lenka Govender, and I have a nutritional practice based in Dublin, in Ireland. And my great passion is really whole food plant based diet and whole food plant based lifestyle. And that's what I deal with. That's what I when I work with people, that's what I encourage them to adopt so they can see for themselves what a really unprocessed plant foods can do for their health and for their vitality. Okay, so now today we will talk about the connection between our immunity and our gut health. So now let me just share my screen. Now at the end, of course, there will be a space for Q&A, okay, for questions. So let me just share my screen and off we go. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We will talk first about really what is it immunity and also inflammation. I will explain properly what leaky gut is and how it affects our immune system. Then we'll talk about good bugs and bad bugs in our gut and what we should actually feed our good bacteria so they take care of us in return in terms of our health. Then I will explain to you and give you examples of top anti-inflammatory foods and also talk you through 5 daily immune boosting swaps. So you can start kind of putting into practice right away what we are going to talk about today. Okay. So, immunity, what is it? Well, immunity is nothing else but just a natural defense mechanism of your body. It actually works like an army shield when it's supposed to stop and protect us against the bacteria and viruses and other pathogens. Okay. And so that's exactly what it really does. So, immunity kills off viruses, bacteria, and other pathogens. It creates antibodies inside our body against these, and that's actually how they get eliminated. And also, our immune system eliminates cancerous cells. So now, what happens if immunity does not work properly? What happens is obviously that you will be more prone to various colds and flus and infections when your immunity is suppressed and low. Now, if it happens and your immunity, on the other hand, goes into overdrive, your immune system has the ability or can actually attack any tissue inside your body. And that's how you may end up with autoimmune type of disease like arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, or even diabetes type 1 and various digestive issues like irritable bowel disease. Okay. And also, if your immunity doesn't work properly, then obviously you are not eliminating and destroying cancerous cells as efficiently as you should. So now let's have a look at inflammation, because inflammation is really part of your immunity. Okay, it's just an immune response to a perceived threat. And I'm sure you have heard of inflammation. There are really two types of inflammation, which we need to be aware of. So the first one, the acute inflammation, is really something our body needs and we need it to fight the pathogens. Okay, and that's something what happens when, for example, you have an allergic reaction or some kind of chemical irritant or a splinter even, okay, some kind of infection or trauma injury. And that's what happens is that, let's say you have your splinter and the inflammation around the spot means that that spot gets swollen and red. It is warm and often there is even some kind of discharge. And this is just the way your body is really fighting the pathogens which are probably there because obviously the splinter was dirty from outside. So that would be acute inflammation. But now there is also chronic inflammation. And that is something what you could have heard of quite a bit. And chronic inflammation is actually inflammation which is inside your body long term. And it's only, usually it's actually lower grade. So it's some people like to describe it as like small type of flame going on inside your body. And we know today from various research, we know that chronic type of inflammation has been linked to probably any of the chronic diseases out there, including cardiovascular disease and neurological disease, even Alzheimer, okay, various skin conditions, even cancer, and even obesity, diabetes. So chronic inflammation is something we really want to avoid. So now, what is one of the drivers, or one of the big drivers of chronic inflammation, is actually carrying extra fat on our body. Is when we are overweight or obese. That's when there is inflammation in our body. And the reason for that is that actually we know today that any excessive or extra fatty tissue is actually metabolically active. So what it means is that it's really considered to be metabolically active tissue, almost like an organ, which in itself creates and produces the inflammatory chemicals, which then trigger the inflammatory pathway and cascade inside our body. Okay, then the fatty tissue and all these chemicals which are produced have the power also of altering our gut microbiome, again in return then influencing and suppressing our immunity. Okay. Now, so what are the inflammation triggers, especially again when it comes to the chronic one? So from food, it's saturated fat. And now, excuse me, the saturated fat is most abundant in animal food. So it would be a red meat, poultry, it would be dairy. Okay, so all the animal foods, they contain saturated fat and they would be driving inflammation. Then animal protein in itself also. Then another trigger of inflammation would be, for example, oxidative damage. And oxidative damage, as you may know, has been linked to creation of free radicals and all that can again trigger the inflammation inside our body. And the oxidative damage often happens inside our body not only because of the environment we live in and various, I don't know, let's say car fumes and stuff like that, but also due to heavy metals, which, for example, you may eat, let's say, in fish, okay? But because seas are so polluted today, actually the heavy metals from the sea would be stored inside the fish. So again, that could lead to oxidative damage. But also from stuff like maybe iron cast skillets and stuff like that, or also oxidative damage happens during cooking of certain foods. Then another trigger would be high ratio of omega-6 fats versus omega-3 fats. So let me just explain. So omega-6 and omega-3 fats are essential fats, and we really need to get them from our diet. And but what's happening in today's society is that if you are someone who eats predominantly meat and uses various cooking oils, you are likely very high in omega-6s, but quite low in omega-3s. So when the ratio is higher than 3 to 1, because that's kind of what's really considered optimal, okay? Omega-6 to omega-3, anywhere between 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1. But if you have any ratio which is higher than that, and often people have even 50 to 1 or even 100 to 1, then it's definitely going to drive inflammation inside your body. Then another trigger would be lack of fiber and also lack of antioxidants. So now, we really know today that more than 70% of our immunity lies in our gut. And even though it may seem kind of a very bold statement, it really is true. And the reason for that is our good gut bacteria. Okay, now we'll talk about those slightly later, but for now, let's have a look about leaky gut syndrome, or basically about gut lining. Let's have a look at our gut lining. Meaning our intestinal wall, and how it's supposed to look so it really protects us against the bugs and toxins and so on. So here in the picture on the left side, you can see that the cells are really tightly next to each other, okay? And that's a healthy intestinal wall. And as you can see, they really don't allow any toxins, bugs, or any undigested pieces of protein, like gluten, for example, penetrate through, okay? But on the right hand side, you can see that these cells of the wall of the intestine actually are separated. There are gaps, and through these gaps, then all these various toxins and bacteria can enter bloodstream and then can circulate around our body. And that's really what we call leaky gut syndrome, because throughout our life, as we are exposed to stress, as we drink coffee, take various medications. If our diet is high in processed foods, high in sugar, high in animal foods, all these things have an impact on the junction of those cells and how tight they are. And they can really cause that the cells separate and allow the toxins to enter the bloodstream. And then it can often happen that obviously this in long run can cause disease, and often also can be a trigger for autoimmune diseases. Then there is another connection between our gut and inflammation, gut and our immunity. And that is what type of food we eat. So specifically, there are two amino acids which are found in eggs and red meat and shrimps, some seafood, and those would be choline and carnitine. Okay, and when we eat that, what happens is that we feed this type of food is really loved by bad bacteria inside our gut, and what they do is that they actually produce this chemical DMAO, which then has an inflammatory effect and damaging effect, and can lead or has been linked at least to diseases like obviously heart disease again, atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes, then also kidney disease. Okay. So now you may be wondering, okay, so do I really have to make big changes? And if so, or if not, how big changes do I have to make? Well, the truth is that actually small changes do count. And I think it's very encouraging, because in this study, published in British Journal of Nutrition, what they looked at was that the people they were studying, they swapped 2 servings of red meat for beans and chickpeas and lentils, okay, on in 1 week. So let's say instead of, I don't know, instead of beef burger, they had a bean burger or maybe lentil chili, okay? And then instead of steak, they maybe made chickpea curry or something like that. And what they noticed, or what they found out, was that already after 8 weeks, just with these simple swaps, their inflammation actually dropped by 1/3, independent of weight change. So I think that's really quite encouraging. So now you may be asking, so what should we eat to feed the good bugs? Plants would be the simplest and fastest answer. Plants, because they contain fiber. And believe it or not, but fiber, even though you may have heard a lot about it, it's actually in the food not to feed us, but to feed the good bacteria, because that's what they thrive on. And then in return, they improve our immunity, they improve our detoxification, our blood sugar balance, our heart health, and also our hormonal balance. So now this is just a study which I wanted to mention because change can be really very fast. This is a study which I think is definitely worth mentioning. And what they did was that they just took a group of people who were full meat eaters. Okay, so they would have, I don't know, bacon for breakfast. At lunch, they would have some kind of chicken sandwich. And then for dinner, they would have maybe pork chops or something like that. And they swapped them to entirely unprocessed vegan diet. But it would be really unprocessed. So it would be your bean curries and stews and chilies and stuff like that. Okay. And already within 3 to 4 days of that change, they could see big changes happening in the composition inside the gut of their gut microbiome. So what they could see was that immediately, that actually after these 3 to 4 days, the microbes, the bugs, gut bacteria, which actually are disease promoting, those would be those which are bile accepting, they actually decreased. Okay. On the contrary, then the bacteria which are health promoting, the variety of them, the good bugs, they increased. They started to thrive. They started to really grow a lot. Also, they could see that the bugs, they started to switching on and off genes. Just because of the plant foods that people were eating. So in other words, they were switching off genes which promote a disease, and they were switching on genes which protect us against diseases. And also they noticed that there were changes. There was actually quite a big drop of the specific bacteria, Bilophila wadsworthia, and that was quite a big deal because this specific bacteria seems to be linked to development of IBD, which is your Crohn's disease, or so this was quite a big deal. Okay. So now, how does it really happen? What do good bugs really do in our body? Well, as we feed them the fiber, so meaning as we eat, I don't know, banana, apple, porridge, beans, that fiber inside the plant foods feeds the good bugs, and as they eat that, then they produce in return short chain fatty acids. And these are absolute miracles for us when it comes to our health, because they are involved in energy production. So actually, indirectly, the good bugs really make us feel better and more energetic. Okay. Then the short chain fatty acids, they help repair leaky gut. So the leaky gut I was talking about at the beginning, which can indirectly lead to a disease in our body, these short chain fatty acids produced by good bugs, they actually help seal the junctions so they become tight again. They also help us prevent diabetes and also influence health of our brain. Now, this is just kind of clarification of terms. So prebiotics, you might have heard of, is actually the food the good bacteria like to eat. And plant foods, there are specific plant foods which are rich in prebiotics, and those would be oats, bananas, asparagus, leeks, green onions, garlic, and artichokes. Probiotics, then, those are the good bacteria. So now you may be wondering how much fiber is really too much and how much fiber should you eat. So Food Safety Authority in Ireland, and it's kind of a worldwide more or less consensus, is that minimum should be really around 25 grams a day of fiber. But I just brought here this table for you to see as a little overview of really how much fiber cultures around the world who are or have been at least historically really low in disease, how much fiber these cultures would have been eating. So you can see that, let's say, rural African and rural Chinese diets, which would be really, people, as I said, who wouldn't suffer from chronic disease as much as in Western countries, they would be anywhere between 60 up to 120 grams of fiber per day, which is absolutely, obviously, much more than 25 grams. And if you still think it's a lot, you can even look at the Paleolithic diet, which is really our very distant ancestors millions of years ago. They had anywhere at around 104 grams of fiber. And in case you're wondering where do we know it from, it's from their fossilized feces. So now this is just these are now a couple of examples for you, just to see that you don't need to go, that crazy. You don't need to go into such big extent and maybe, aim for that high number, because obviously also if you're not used to it, your gut would start giving out to you and you would have, bloating and gas and stuff like that. So here I just put together an example of what it's like if you had around 40 grams of fiber. So it's still more than the RDA, but it's quite doable in my opinion. Okay, so it would be that you would have a cup of legumes, you would have about 2.5 cups of any grain. So that would be oatmeal and quinoa and buckwheat, whatever grain, brown rice you could think of. Then you would have about 3 pieces of fruit, 2.5 cups of cooked veggies, and 1 handful of nuts or seeds. And here in the pictures, you can see how it would look. So for breakfast, you could have, like a grain bowl, whether it's buckwheat or quinoa, with some berries and a few nuts. Okay. Then as a mid-morning snack or something like that, you could have fruit. You could snack on fruit. Then as lunch, you could have brown rice with some lentil chili. And then you could have even a little treat, which is like a kind of frozen sorbet from fruit, from raspberries and bananas. And then, only at lunch, yet we already ate close to 40 grams of fiber. So then at dinner, you could just have, grilled asparagus with something else, and you are already exceeding that 40-gram fiber mark. Okay, so that's why I just wanted to put it together to show you that it's really doable. So now variety does count. Okay, so here is just a remark on that on this, that really there are plant-based doctors who specialize in gut health, and they actually recommend that we should strive to eat anywhere around 30 to 40 different plants in a week. Now, I know it may sound like a lot, but you can just try it as an experiment at home. When you just start writing and thinking, okay, so what am I having for breakfast? What am I having as snacks, for lunch, for dinner? And every different grain, every different seed, every different fruit and veg and stuff, and you will see that it will actually really add up. And the reason why variety is quite important is that different plants has different type of fiber, but different plant also tends to feed different strain of the good bacteria. And the bigger variety of the good bacteria in our gut is, the bigger health we experience and the bigger protection from disease we also experience. So now let's have a look at top anti-inflammatory foods, because I spoke about inflammation quite a bit at the beginning. So how, apart from plant foods bringing into our diet, how else can we kind of up the anti-inflammatory effect? So it would be herbs. It would be herbs and spices. Now the leader is really turmeric. Okay, again, due to its curcumin, due to its active part, curcumin, it really suppresses inflammation very potently. There is some evidence showing that already half a teaspoon a day works on inflammation of joints, skin, and gut. Then also, apart from turmeric, it would be also cinnamon, oregano, ginger. Okay, so you can see it's not only the Indian type of spices, but also green spices. Then more of the anti-inflammatory foods would be greens. There is really never too much of kale or greens you could eat, because yes, they are incredibly high in nutrients, but also very potent when it comes to fighting inflammation. Then it would be also your flax and chia seeds, because they are rich in the naturally anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats. Also berries. Berries, again, very potent anti-inflammatory food, as well as beans. Beans specifically, they contain a resistant starch. And resistant starch, again, supports our good bacteria in producing the short-chain fatty acids. And that also actually boosts our white blood cells, which are a part of our immunity. And then it will be also whole grains. So now with this list, you may be wondering, okay, but there are really no specific foods, but it's actually on purpose, because studies have shown over and over again that it really is the variety, okay? That it really is the combination of different plant foods like this, the synergistic effect of them all together, what is the most powerful and the most potent when it comes to your health, to boosting immunity, to gut health, to weight, essentially what really protects you. Okay, so now let's have a look at the practical side. Let's have a look at the daily swaps to boost your immunity. So first, definitely include in your diet every day either a green smoothie or a large salad, or both. if you're up to it. Now, when I talk about a salad, just make sure that it really counts, okay? That it's not just like few salad leaves on the side and one little circle of onion and a slice of tomato. Okay, it really should be a plate or a large bowl filled with different vegetables. Or alternatively, as I said, it can be totally a green smoothie. So just make sure that it's jam-packed, with the crucifers, if you can put kale. Then also, obviously, you can use spinach, baby spinach. You can also put, I don't know, celery and cucumber, and use a little bit of fruit just to sweeten it up a bit. Okay. Then swap dairy for plants, because again, dairy is a highly inflammatory food. And so if you can swap it and get it out of your diet and instead bring in plants, you are doing yourself a huge favor. So you may be wondering, okay, what to put on bread or what to have instead of cheese. So you can obviously make various types of pestos made from fresh herbs, mixed up with beans, garlic, spices, processed in a food processor. You have a delicious kind of pata, delicious spread or dip, maybe for roasted potatoes or something like that, okay? You can also use avocado, that is great. And of course, for dairy milks, there is such a big variety out there now of plant milks. Just make sure you get unsweetened type. Then make sure, or another good thing would be to have a cup of beans a day. So obviously it can be typical something like lentil chili or homemade bean burger, or it can be just something very simple, like just, steamed potatoes, veggies, tin of beans, and some hummus, some kind of dip for times when you don't have time to cook or anything like that. Okay, the tinned beans are absolutely fine. I would just recommend to make sure you get them in water without any salt or sugar added. Again, that would make the biggest sense for your health. Then 1 tablespoon of ground flax or chia seeds a day. You can either sprinkle it on your breakfast, over your salad, or add to a smoothie. And then make sure that you introduce fruit and spices. So don't be afraid to treat yourself with fruit, okay? They are natural candies and nature just made them for us to enjoy. So don't be afraid of fruit. You can make it a big fruit salad, and you can bake with fruit, okay? You can sweeten your muffins, for example, with apples and bananas, and you can then also make something like, what is it called? Turmeric latte. Okay, because how I was talking about the anti-inflammatory effect of turmeric. So here you go. You can use a quarter teaspoon, half a teaspoon of turmeric, about quarter teaspoon cinnamon, quarter teaspoon nutmeg, a little bit of ground black pepper, mix it with almond milk, warm it up, sweeten a little bit with the date syrup, and voila, you have a gorgeous treat, which is very, very healthy. Okay, so now what to watch out for? Okay, so obviously I'm talking here so much about fiber and how much is that important. Now it is, but I'd like to ask you to be honest to yourself and have a look at your diet today. Okay, so what does your diet look like today? I mean, because obviously, if you are not used to eating too many vegetables or too much of, beans and stuff like that, introducing too much immediately can be quite discouraging, because you would feel bloated and gas and stuff like that. So for this, start maybe with 1 cup of lightly steamed veg a day, okay? If you feel like already you suffer from bloating. Now, it can be something, some veg which you find is safe for you. So it can be just even steamed carrots, okay? It can be steamed zucchini. If you are fine with broccoli, steamed broccoli, okay? Just to get used to more vegetables in your diet. Also, if you are someone who has a sensitive gut, just be careful with raw veggies, and specifically onions and peppers. Sometimes green peppers can be quite kind of gas promoting or can cause bloating. And also maybe watch out for Brassica family. Now to that, I just like to add that often not, if brassica family, broccoli, cauliflower, or Brussels sprouts, if they cause you any issues, often it's not actually all of them. So just pick one which hopefully suits you, and you just eat that one. Okay, because I have dealt with people who could handle broccoli but couldn't handle cauliflower, or the other way around. So it just depends really on your specific case. And then also, it might be a good idea if you have a little bit sensitive gut or experience bloating, to eat fruit on its own. So what I mean by that is that often we tend to sweeten our breakfast with fruit, which is perfectly healthy. But again, for some people, it may cause bloating and gas later in the day. And the reason for that is that fruit is very high in water and it's very easy to digest. So it actually starts to ferment in our gut. So fruit, when you are eating it, just make the fruit salad maybe in the mid-afternoon or something like that, when it wouldn't cause you then problems. Okay, so Nutri beans. If you have Nutri beans, I recommend start with small size beans. So it could be something like red lentils or black-eyed peas, and also in small quantities. So it can be just like 1 tablespoon you add to your typical meal which you would have, just to bring it in, bring that fiber in, and start repopulating and colonizing that gut. So the good bacteria actually are getting that fiber. Then also is a good idea to start adding, for example, red lentils to chilies and stews in the place of meat. So again, it can be on a small portion just to thicken it, and again, introduce bigger variety to your meals. And also then just make sure that you actually eat them with something bulkier, that you don't eat them maybe on their own to avoid discomfort. So eat them with some starch like potatoes or rice. Okay. Yeah. So now to sum it up, your health really starts in your gut. Okay. So for your ideal gut health, eat a variety of whole plant foods, fruits and vegetables, and whole grains and beans and seeds every day. If you take care of your good bugs, they will take care of you in return. Okay. So now, before I let you go, if you need any more information or you'd like to get in touch with me, you can visit my website, planthappygirl.com. I have loads of various resources there. You can find various tips and advice on how to really clean up your diet, how to bring in more fiber, but also on weight loss, healthy and sustainable weight loss, and there are various recipes, even sugar-free treats, and also information on weight loss programs, which I run. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Okay, so that's it. Thank you so much. And now let's have a look at the Q&A. So I just stopped recording.